Welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. CMC connects people and ideas through community conversations at forums just like this one every week of the year. I'm Joelle Kuzam with the law firm of Bricker Graydon. I'm a proud member of the CMC Board of Trustees and a friend to many of the organizations who are with us today. We are so grateful to today's many sponsors: Installed Building Products, Mollard Consulting, Nationwide, and the United Way of Central Ohio. Thank you to the presenting sponsor of our live stream, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, our live stream partner, the Columbus Dispatch, and the Ellis for hosting us. Every CMC forum takes a village. Let's thank all of today's supporting presenters. Well, we have all heard about the looming cutbacks in federal funding that could impact some of Central Ohio's most vulnerable populations, including immigrants and refugees. That's the topic of today's forum, When Safety Nets Shrink. With our esteemed panel, we will unpack why this is happening, the impact that potential cutbacks are likely to have in the communities, and what actions we can collectively take. To introduce today's wonderful panelists, please help me welcome Chad Jester from Nationwide.
Thank you. We have a great panel today and not nearly enough time to cover the complexity of the issue that has been presented. But let's start with a realization. We love Columbus. I hope everybody in this room does. And by the way, this is a packed room, so thanks for showing up today. But Columbus is a prosperous community. We're a growing community, a thriving community in so many ways. Unfortunately, that prosperity is not shared by all. That's why our safety net services are essential for a portion of our population. But as we continue to grow, the growth is not all top-end growth. We are growing at all population levels, especially with folks who have needs in our community where the safety net helps keep the bottom from falling out further, provides stability, and hopefully a platform for households to grow and enjoy that prosperity with the rest of the community. At Nationwide and the Nationwide Foundation, we've been involved with safety net services for many, many years. Homelessness and hunger have been two of our key platforms of our funding for many, many years. So we've had a chance to get to know some of the panelists today. They have a lot to say, I'm sure, and again, a very tight window to do it. That's why we have a great facilitator in Dr. Lisa Courtice, who will drive the conversation. But we're going to introduce the panelists, and you are allowed to share your applause for the panelists, if you would, today. So let's start with my immediate left, Dr. Seleshi Asfaw from ETTS, Ethiopian Tewahedo Social Services. I passed the test. All right. Next, Liz Brown, CEO of the YWCA of Columbus. Liz. Michael Corey, Executive Director of the Human Service Chamber of Franklin County. Michael. That was pretty good. Was that your table doing all the applause and the, yep, all right. Your mom, good. And Shannon Hardin, President of Columbus City Council. And our facilitator and host, Dr. Lisa Courtice, CEO of the United Way of Central Ohio. Lisa.
Is your mom really in the audience? I think she might be. Stand up. Thank you for Michael. That's fabulous. Thank you all for being here and caring. I can't wait to hear your questions. I can't wait to hear from our panelists. Before November, when we elected a new president and then now have a new administration, our hair was already on fire because of the loss of, or no longer being able to access ARPA funding. So this is just adding on to what is already a crisis. So I thought we would start by first asking Michael, who many of us, by the cheers in the room, look to level set and help us understand where we are today in this chaotic environment. So Michael, what is the White House seeking to do, and what is the current state of federal funding?
So I get 30 minutes to answer this question, right? Well, thank you all. It's a real honor to be on this panel and in this room. It feels like a membership meeting of ours. If you're a nonprofit CEO, can you stand up and please accept the applause of the room for the work that you're doing right now? It's actually better attendance than we've ever had for a membership meeting, so this is great. And if you're an elected official or work for one, will you stand up so we know that you're here and we can thank you for your service? That was more for me than for you, so I can know not to get in trouble with anybody that's here. So as Lisa noted, we knew it was going to be a tough year regardless because of the ARPA dollars. That's true for nonprofits across the United States. And there were lots of plans that were already in motion to prepare for a tighter 2025. And in a growing community, which is a good problem to have, you need to change the way you fund that community and its needs. And it's hard to do that on pace that's needed. That's the kind of conversation that had been happening. And with the new administration, things are tougher because there's so much extraordinary change being proposed or sought extraordinarily fast. So I will try to somewhat efficiently get through the range of things of note, and then you'll learn from my bosses, and you'll learn from Council President Hardin as well. Let me start with saying, for decades, nonprofits have worked with Republicans and Democrats to serve Republicans and Democrats. This is not partisan stuff. It has become that, but it isn't. There are 4 ways in which the administration is having significant effect on nonprofits right now. The first is through executive orders. The second is through executive actions. The third are through agency actions. Those are just beginning to kick off. And the fourth is coming, and that's through legislation. Let's talk about the executive orders first. You know that there were a significant number that were released on January 20th, and some have trickled out since then. There are 7 in particular that the administration is, let's say, wielding to target nonprofits and organizations around them, higher education, foundations, et cetera. The ones of most significance to our sector, the executive orders rather, are those pertaining to quote unquote diversity, equity, and inclusion, immigration and refugees, anything pertaining to gender, and other items. But that DEI piece has created all sorts of uncertainty for nonprofits because equity is kind of baked into what nonprofits are trying to do. So the executive action piece really kicked off with a memo that was released from the Office of Management and Budget on January 27th, leaked to the Washington Post. And it said, all funding that's coming out through grants is going to be paused 5 p.m. tomorrow. That created a ripple effect of things that have happened, but the long story short is it's on pause thanks to a federal court in D.C. But the ambition to do that, to cut off funding as quickly as possible, is very much there. That's $3 trillion that we initially thought, well, that's in jeopardy across nonprofits and other entities. We learned the next day, on the 28th, that they were going to winnow that down to funding that was tethered to some of those executive orders that I mentioned. So we've asked our members, we have 220 members we serve, how would that affect you? What amount of money would be affected by that? We had responses from 72 agencies saying we think that would affect us That'd be $150 million affected by those executive orders. $150 million. That's substantial. That's services to 2,400,000 people in the Central Ohio area. Just in our membership, just in this community. That is a massive wallop to a huge chunk of the economy if this goes through. We looked at federal funding more broadly, though, because on Friday night, in a very little seen memo from the White House, they said explicitly, we're going to look at every dollar going to nonprofits. Every dollar. Now, if they're being originalists, they said, we want to look at future funding. So this may not suggest another immediate challenge for all nonprofits. But just to get a sense of the scale, our members say they receive $230 million in federal dollars overall. So again, this is a substantial threat and challenge. Agency action, the third area. They're just now getting in these secretaries over the agencies, the ones that they want to keep running, that is. And we're watching very closely a few agencies in particular because they're very relevant to the health and human services sector. Their programming, their dollars, their operations, their support. The first is Health and Human Services. Having Mr. Kennedy in there would pose some obvious challenges to the work that is done. Second, the Department of Justice, because they can go after nonprofits if they're trying to engage in the DEI work that is now in the crosshairs. Third is the Department of Education, which they're trying to eliminate altogether. There's all sorts of funding baked into that. And the fourth is a boring one, but it's a key one, and it's the Office of Management and Budget. And that secretary just got through. And that brings us to the legislation piece, and that's going to be relevant in a couple of days as there's a budget that is pursued by the federal government through a process called reconciliation. They're infighting right now in the Republican Party, the majority party, on how much they want to cut. They're waffling between 1.5 trillion with a T and 2 trillion. And the big targets are Medicaid and other programs indirectly and directly relevant to health and human services nonprofits. Real quickly, and then I'll shut up. The ripple effect of all this is really important to be cognizant of too. For example, the state of Ohio's new budget came out yesterday afternoon. There is language in there that would trigger the cessation of Medicaid expansion in Ohio if federal funds don't match up to 90%. There are about 13 states that have such language. That's a significant effect here in Ohio related to all of this. So in sum, there has never been anything quite like this before, and courts and people in communities are having to adapt and figure this out in real time, and we're talking to lots of lawyers, and we're talking to lots of statewide and national advocates in this space to try and all figure out together how we adapt and get through this.
Thank you. The impetus for today's program started in a conversation that we had with Dr. Seleshi, who for weeks and months and years has been educating us about the importance of our immigrant and refugee community and the needs that they have. Unfortunately, in the first Trump administration, he gained some experience in what it means to lose funding. So we're eager to hear from you about what this means, what you predict, threats you're seeing for our immigrant and refugee population.
Thank you, Dr. Lisa, my friend. We are fortunate having a leader like you, passionate, and since we know each other since 2004, 2005. And my friends, I have seen a lot of good friends that were working together in every area to build really Columbus a place where to live. And I'm really honored to be with Mike and Elizabeth and our president, Shannon Hardin. So I just, Michael, he did really a great job on giving you the general picture. I will do more specific to refugee immigrant community. What is the situation? how is our communities are feeling, and in particular that resettlement agencies. There are 3 resettlement agencies here in Central Ohio. Jewish Family Services, Karen is here. I'm glad that you came, and Tariq, and Angie Plummer with Chris, and myself, Ethiopian Tewahedo Social Services, which is our short name, ETSS Tewahedo Social Service. I see some of my board members and my staff. I'm glad that everyone is here because this is what the Columbus way. In time of crisis, we come together. And the situation in general, we're in a very stressful situation. My staff are frustrated because they think about their future, their clients' future. Our refugee immigrant families live in fear. Every time, every day, they are really taking care of their children, staying at home. And even documented individuals, those who have legally documented individuals have a fear. And undocumented individuals are very, very afraid. This is a situation that we are struggling with. Before the executive order and after the executive order, what's happening and what it means to the refugee immigrant community is really, we are on the first line of attack on these executive orders. So when, in January 20, about Monday, one of my friends sent me a text, have you seen this? And I open it and I see that the United States Refugee Admission Program suspended. This is on Reuters headline. When I see it, I was very, very shocked. I couldn't sleep because I see how the struggle that, I was thinking about our clients, our future, our community. What it is, because it's a legally endorsed program since the 1980s. That's if you see your first generation, second generation, third generation, all of you came through these kind of programs, your ancestors or your grandpa or any generations. So that if that legally program has been affected, then what is the guarantee that all of us will have? So I was very, very worried. And then following that, all flights of refugees has been canceled. Half of the families are here, and half of the families are back home. That's very disturbing. About 6,000 flights have been canceled. And the most significant breaking our services and us is really when the stop to work order comes up. That is really very, very challenging, and I'll tell you why. Because between the 3 resettlement agencies, there are about 460 refugees. We welcome them in Columbus. And we are obligated to provide them in 90 days basic and critical services to be integrated in the community, because we don't have anyone except our case managers, our people, our helpers, and our volunteers. They don't have anyone. They don't have anyone to call even if there's something emergency, something happening. We are in our custody, but we have been told to stop. No one is going to pay you. You lay off your staff, whichever you want. Even the challenge is really no one is going to give you an answer. It's very uncertain and unclear. So we have to decide either to leave them on the way on the street, or we have to continue serving them at least that obligated 90 days. What are those basic services and critical services for these refugees coming here in our door? Number 1, we welcome them at the airport, provide them transportation to their designated space. We have to find them a space, but in the meantime, because as you know, there's, Columbus is housing crisis everywhere. It's very difficult to find a space and then we temporarily will have a hotel, and then staying in the hotel, we have to spend $230 per week, and discounting, and still some of our clients are in the hotel. No one is going to support these people. So then we have to enroll to English as second language classes, for health screening, enrollment for their children. And all these are really, because within the 90 days, we want to make sure that they are self-sufficient and get employment to pay their rents. That is what it stopped, and that's what the dilemma. We don't know how to pay our payroll for our staff. And the other thing is that, the services that we provided on November, December, January, we are not reimbursed. The federal government stop and freeze. Our national organizations, they are working hard. So this is the situation that we are in. It's really hurting the refugees, immigrants who are here. They trust in us. I trust you, I believe in you. When I order my staff, go ahead and work because I trust you. I know and I believe our local government, you as a funders and partners will not fail us. This is a situation in the immigrant community, but together, if united together, and then make our collective voices, we can make a difference. Thank you so much.
And Liz, would you continue that thread and talk about the threats that you are seeing for the YWCA?
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. It's really great to be here and to see so many faces of people who care and are thinking about what they can do to stand in the gap when the safety net shrinks. So thank you. So one thing that is ever more clear to me, being in this role now for 2 years, is that the existence of nonprofits depends on our ability to be responsive to the people we serve. We are very smart at understanding what our clients need. And the threats that Michael talked about and that Dr. Seleshi talked about in our funding is critically important. It can't be overstated what we're navigating. But additionally, what I fear are these mandates by the federal government telling us how to do what we do, because they don't know the best way to serve our clients. We very much do. And I mean that about all of my colleagues in here, but I know that we've been around since 1886 because we know how to serve our clients. So what these agency actions really endanger in YW's operations are changing the way that we are allowed to serve our unhoused residents, right? So going in and telling us that we can't track demographic data, that we can't educate around fair housing rules. I mean, the list goes on. When we sort of casually refer to DEI, it is deeper than that. And it's really about, at the end of the day, human lives, which again, we deeply understand. Another thing I know to be sure about nonprofits is that we are the most efficient place that you can spend $1. Our profit is mission, right? We are exceedingly efficient. So I won't comment on the irony that the federal government has their gaze turned at nonprofits rather than a lot of for-profit contracts the federal government has, which are generating 20% profits at minimum for private companies. They have decided to look at nonprofits. And what we do and how we invest in our community, as I said, bottom line is mission. So for YWCA, I am most fearful that we are going to be told that we have to change how we serve people. And I am also fearful that programs, if they're, for example, we have programs tied to the Department of Education. Those sorts of things could immediately be changed. But what I'm also turning my attention to is what I knew would be hard about 2025 in the first place, which is that in our community, and Michael and Lisa talked about this, we have a really strong nonprofit sector, and we're kind of bursting at the seams though, right? Because the community is growing and we're still wearing the jacket that fit us really well 20 years ago and like expecting that it will still fit, right? Without the seams bursting, being a little too short and looking a little funny walking around. And we have to grapple with how we fund the human need we have today. At YWCA, that is about caring for unhoused people and sheltering our unhoused population. We have to change the way that we do that to be responsive to this growing community. As Chad Jester said, we are prospering on so many factors. We are not yet prospering on how we are looking out for those most marginalized.
Council President Hardin, thank you so much for raising your hand to be here today. How does the city plan to address these challenges and and other threats? Yeah, what's your plan?
Well, would you do me a favor and give these three panelists and Lisa and then yourselves a round of applause? I say that because, yes, the city and the county and the private sector, our job is here to support this sector. But what you just heard was the advocacy, the cries out for help of folks who get the calls every day from our most vulnerable residents in our community. And like they say on the airplane, you have to put your oxygen mask on first before you can help someone else. And part of my deep frustration and the deep pain that I think a lot of us feel is it seems like the chaos is also part of this. There seems like there is a purpose coming from state and federal government for chaos that has a purpose to overwhelm the system. And so I think it's really critically important that before we even go into next steps, that we, one, celebrate, but also acknowledge the work that this sector is doing. The last person that talked to me before the panel was Councilmember Bankston, and he said, well, give them some hope, Shannon. And then the three panelists spoke, and I'm like, well, damn.
We're really fun at parties.
Yeah, I think that this is what I think. To your point, we were always going to be having some sort of this conversation. The ARPA dollars that we have all become reliant on were going away. And I said that it's important for our community to know that we didn't superfund the sector with ARPA. We actually just finally right-sized funded the sector. And so the needs were not going to go away in 2025, but some of those resources were going to go away. And so this is the hope that I think that we have in communities and in Columbus that Nick was telling me to give. And what makes me very fearful for other communities around the country is that we are best positioned to deal with problems like this because we have these strong public and private partnerships, because we have a sector that has a leader like Mike Corey that can come together, that can stack hands and advocate together. We are ahead of so many other communities already because of the ecosystem that we have already built. Now, it's funny, Liz said, like, I'm a little nervous because I don't do this as much anymore. That whole jacket that don't fit thing, I'm gonna use that, girl. Yeah, I'm gonna use it because that's exactly the conversation that we have to have now is the challenges that we face right now. Yes, that is a moral test for us. That is a moral issue. But the bigger issue is a leadership test that we have to now step up in a region that is growing and needs new resources, it needs new ideas, it needs bigger and bolder ways to fill the gaps and fix the holes that we are seeing now. That was going to be there anyways because of our growth. It was going to, these new questions and how we figure this out was always going to be there. And so I think that we are well positioned to step up and to fill a gap that is coming. I will say that hearing Dr. Seleshi speak really pissed me off. Because when you think about our immigrant and refugee community, and you think about how cruel some of this is to that community, and then you think about what that community brings to us as a city, as a region, as a state. I mean, we've been riding this wave on growth and saying how cool it is. Half of our growth comes from the immigrant and refugee population. Like, what are we talking about here? Like, the state of Ohio would have lost population had it not been for this population, and yet we are putting them through this. It makes no sense. And in Columbus, we will stand up when when our values are not met at the state and federal government. This is the time when we stand up and make our values even louder and even more bold on the local level. And so that's what we will do.
I'm voting for you next time. So as a group, as a collective of servant leaders, we want to do it all. because we care for all, right? And we are passionate about those in need and want to help. We're going to be faced with making hard decisions and prioritizing. How do we go about that? I'm opening it up to the panel.
I think that prioritization is going to be a key word for us as a community over the next probably couple years. Just this week, led by Councilmember Bankston, Council passed our city's operating budget, $1.2 billion. And we have been saying since we received the mayor's budget, and certainly when we ended the year and got to balance our checkbooks, that this was the tightest budget that the city had seen in at least the 10 years that I've been on council. And so that scared me because for the last several years, we have been filling gaps with carryover dollars. Council would, the sector would come to council and we'd be able to put extra dollars out. Well, we didn't have that ability to do that. So we had to really work very closely with the administration to find resources to fill gaps that are real and that had impact. And when I think about a tight budget, and it's not just going to be the city, it's going to be the county, and it's also going to be the private sector who are dealing with different challenges as well. We're going to have to say that I know we want to do it all, and I know that we want to do the shiny and cool stuff that a growing community likes and wants to do. But for the next 16 or maybe even 18 months, we might need to focus ourselves on the things that we have to do. And now those things are things like take care of our people. Those things are the human service sector. It is why that in the budget that we passed, council saw that there was a real gap in funding for our shelter system and nearly doubled the funding for the shelter system. Because the one thing that we can't do is go backwards. In this year, in the next 16, 18 months where it gets tight, prioritizing people and making sure that that if we are going to make big investments, those investments are in this sector, knowing that we still want to do the fun thing, knowing that we need to do the build outs and all those things, but understanding that we can't, if we, for instance, I'm just using the shelter system, if we allow more folks to go onto the streets in the next 16 or 18 months, it will be extremely difficult to put that genie back in the bottle. And so, so for me and how I would talk to council and to the administration, to my colleagues at the county, making sure that we step up now more than ever with this sector, I think is critically important.
And if I could just add on to that, thank you. Council President Hardin, one of the things, YWCA does a lot of things in our community, but one of them is operating an emergency shelter for families. And I want you guys to think about when you're talking about your community with friends or family, what is like one of the biggest, please set aside politics, what is one of the biggest challenges that you all kind of say, yeah, our community is facing this as our biggest challenge? How many of you think it's housing? Right? Like this is what we talk about a lot, and it kind of doesn't matter what you do for a living, you notice it. When we think about the challenge that is housing, where the Band-Aid is most frayed, where the scab is open, where people are really hurting, are those that are in our emergency shelters. So my shelter, our shelter at YWCA, a third of the people in our shelter work for a living. A third of the people in our shelter work for a living, and they are homeless, and they have kiddos, and they are relying on leadership. Thank you, President Hardin. They are relying on leadership to see that of all of our many housing challenges that require collective effort, locking arms, understanding the challenge and meeting the challenge, we cannot gloss over those whom the system has most deeply failed. And because the housing challenges have grown, our unhoused population has also grown by a lot. So that ill-fitting jacket, again, I think is on full display when it comes to the size and scope that our shelters must need. And as President Hardin said, these ARPA dollars plugged a hole that had been growing. And the exit of those dollars, because we knew they would always expire, requires a new and creative solution. So that's what we want to work with our community on, because if there is no replacement for what ARPA did for the shelter community, some of us are facing, I will speak for myself, a 50% budget cut to the family center that I operate. So how do we continue to say we need to meet the housing challenges in our community, but look the other way when that comes in the form of homelessness? I don't think we can. And I think this is the moment to figure it out, because if we don't, as Council President Hardin said, that genie does not go back in the bottle. That trauma on a child is not reversed. And we have to get that individual about it when we think about impacts.
What does 50%, Liz, what does 50% of a cut to your organization mean to our community? What would that say about our values? What is that value statement? I think it's really important when we talk about this.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I think, one of the priorities that we have to is the emergency funding gap. Not now we are struggling with. We are in a hot spot, so we have to seal that, because we have to keep our infrastructure that we have built for a long, long time. Because once you dismantle, to bring it back, it takes years and years to build in. Because it is so important for us, And then assess our core values and what are really the critical, services that our community is looking for. Because unemployment, the needy families, the refugee immigrant communities, those vulnerable people that we are caring, because otherwise there will be a social and political chaos is going to come. Just to make.
We have time for one more question, but before we do that, and after the one question, we'll open up to your questions. It is a long-standing tradition that CMC takes questions now from the virtual audience as well as the in-person audience. So if you have questions and you're in this room, please make your way back where Doug is standing at the microphone. And if you are virtual, we hope that you'll put your question in the chat. This weekend in the New York Times, the editorial board had an opinion piece that was titled, "Now is not the time to tune out." So what does advocacy look like?
I'll jump in because we're an advocacy organization. I know that others have comments on this. So YWCA is not just a human services organization. We are a social justice organization. We were founded to be both. And I think that, right now, as Council President Hardin said, and as I've seen so many talk about, that like it's so chaotic and that feels like the point. The chaos is the point. There's actually Naomi Klein's theory called shock doctrine, right? Which it's like you just shock the system and people don't know where to move. And I was reading a post by a sociologist named Jennifer Walter who said that right now, the most important thing we can do is share the cognitive load, because that helps us to act. And we have infrastructure in this community to do that. Just look around this room, but then think about the 10 other people that aren't here. And when we share the cognitive load, we are able to build network intelligence, right? We are able to process and synthesize what's happening. So that is just a reminder that we're in this together. But I say more tactically, as an advocacy organization, we are firm believers in continuing to raise our voices. Michael talked about, the upcoming process in Congress of budget reconciliation. I would be more fearful right now. I'm cribbing from Ezra Klein, but he wrote a recent column that got me thinking about this. I would be more fearful if the administration were moving slowly right now, right? If they were building coalitions in Congress behind all these actions they were taking, and they were methodically changing the way government works in our country, but they are not doing that. They are moving so fast because they are not powerful enough to move slow. And the slow process that is going to unfold in front of us, which is the legislation, that's where we act. We have to talk about impact. We have to say, I'm a voter, and this is what's happening in my community. and I need you to vote for my community. I mean, it is back to the basics in so many ways. The last thing I will say is that I've been overwhelmed, like all of us, a little depressed at times, and I am just thinking to myself, is there a way that, because we are a racial justice organization, our mission is eliminating racism and empowering women. Like, we can't hide from the DEI, guys. This is us. We're not walking away, we are here. And I don't believe that there is some national abandonment of justice, dignity, freedom. I don't believe that. And maybe we are not seeing sort of like the death of DEI right now. We are in a moment of rebirth. After all the dismantling and all the effort that we do to move forward, maybe pushing that boulder up the mountain, we're stronger at the top because of that. When I have to find optimism, that's how I think about it, and I believe that that sort of approach can power our advocacy.
You see why I have the best job in the world. I get to work for people like Dr. Seleshi and Liz. I have 3 answers to this question. The first is traditional. In the first Trump administration, I was brand new in this role, and we focused our advocacy on Senator Rob Portman. We built a really deep relationship with him and his staff. They came to all sorts of our meetings and events, and the advocacy was, Senator Portman, will you please tell the White House to do that and not to do that? This time around, we'll be doing the same thing, but we'll be focusing on Senator Husted and Representative Kerry. They are in the majority party in the House and Senate. They are willing to listen, and we will tax that as much as we possibly can. And our urging through our members, through the whole community, will be build a relationship with their voicemails. Engage with them however you can. Congress has been flooded with calls. Historic numbers of calls have been coming in. Keep it up. Engaging in that way, go to their town halls, go to everything you can and engage with them. They got to hear it. They got to hear it from our sector. They got to hear it from other sectors, and they will, and they are. It is not a foregone conclusion that everything the administration wants to do will get done. They're squabbling right now over Medicaid expansion because a lot of folks don't want to cut everything. So we can hold the line and achieve that through that traditional means of advocacy, whether it's digital or being there in person. The second is reach out to this community. Anyone that can galvanize resources, especially dollars, give generously, and give generally. Don't put tethers to these dollars. Nonprofits are going to have to be flexible. Got to do it. And the third answer is, I have no idea. The only thing I would say is, we have to be impatient for justice and patient with one another while we navigate all of this.
I know Seleshi has a quick thing to say, because the good news is we've got a really long line of questions, so real quick.
So advocacy matters because we have an opportunity of 90 days that the president requested the Secretary of Homeland Security and the State to give them a report that is to our national interest. So this is our time, really. We need that. That's why we're here, is really to ask you to advocate, call your Congress, senators, and any representatives that even some people, they don't know between the difference between the border issue and legal, resettlement program. Even still, they are calling our people illegal. There is no illegal person on this planet. We are all legals, yes. Because the misunderstanding is so high. So please, let's advocate. Let's have this kind of forums. This is really a good opportunity for us to speak and talk to you. That's what we have to mobilize our community and then make a difference. Thank you.
Dr. Courtice, thank you very much. Thank you to today's panelists. If you have a question, please do join us here at the microphone. We have about 10 minutes left, and we'll try to get to at least maybe, I hope, 3 or 4 questions, maybe 1 or 2 more. If you have a question, please do keep in mind our ground rules here at CMC. Great questions take 30 seconds or less to ask. And my question every week, what punctuation mark does a question actually end in? It ends in a question mark. Yes, thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Karen.
Hi, thank you. I'm Karen Mosenter, and I'm with Jewish Family Services. So we're one of the organizations that is affected with federal funding that across our programs for refugees, workforce, mental health and wellness. And I'd like to ask about the economic impact of these potential cutbacks. We heard a little bit about it, about the impact that refugees have had on our region's growth, about the projected growth of our region, the size of the jacket. And Council President Hardin, you spoke about our success with public and private partnerships. So I wonder if you could speak more about the role of the business community in stepping up at this moment, because it doesn't come without risk right now. But certainly we need the business community in ways that are really critical to success.
Well, sure, but I think that we need everybody at this moment, and that's why the city and the county and the business community are coming together to put together the Funding Review Advisory Committee. This is something that we do every several years. Last time I think was 2010. To have big conversations around how we all start to fill these gaps. And I think that it's going to be really important as we come together as a community, when we have the business community at the table, when we have the city and we have the county, all of the funding partners, that we are not afraid to put all the ideas on the table. Like when Liz was talking about right sizing the jacket, this is the opportunity to do that. I think that we can't be afraid to center some conversations around the human service sector, to center some conversations around our unhoused population. We're going to have everybody at the table in this conversation. This is a conversation around arts and tourism. It's a conversation around homelessness. It's a conversation around how do we fund all of these things. But when we say prioritization and everyone stepping up, we're going to have to really focus that conversation on the biggest needs. And I think that the biggest need right now is making sure that people are supported in this moment. And not just, I don't want us to just be bold about solutions and uncomfortable about how we talk about this and how we ask different sectors to step up, but I also want us to move with urgency as well. So when ideas come up that can be supported or can be funded, we should not sit back and wait for a full report to be put out. We don't have that kind of time anymore. We're going to have to push for us to step up and do the thing. And so I don't want to play the game of just putting on one or the other. We all are going to have to do new things, bigger things, and more uncomfortable things in this moment.
Thank you for that, Council President Hardin. We really appreciate it, and we're excited about the work to come there. I just want to reinforce a couple of quick things there. First, as a community, we have made enormous investments in our infrastructure in recent years. We just did it last fall with Link Us, something we eagerly supported. That'll have all sorts of benefits for our membership, and CODA has been a tremendous partner, and YWCA, et cetera. It's Health and Human Services time to get a big investment in the people and work that they do. And it's important. And we know whatever we come up with, immediate funding and long-term funding, it won't be enough to deal with the federal cuts that might be coming. But it's a critical, enormous investment in this community's future for the good things that can come from that too, not just the bad stuff that we're going to prevent from happening. We have to be thinking of it from both of those directions, because that is true. Second, the economic impact of the health and human services nonprofit sector is $2 billion in this community every year. It is enormous. It employs 18,000 people. It's an economic engine. The margins are just a hell of a lot tighter than they are for other sectors. And they're uniquely vulnerable to the whims of politicians. And we're seeing that in real time. So we're not just thinking about all the critical pieces we've talked about, we're talking about our economy too. All of this has to be contemplated as we make these decisions in the coming weeks and months.
Thank you. I'm going to combine two similar questions, one from Leanna Barbu and one from Amy Gordon together. With the uncertainty of funding for nonprofits, what is a practical way the community can step in to help address gaps and support our nonprofit partners and those they serve?
I think The support that we are looking from the community to help the nonprofit is number one, as we said, is advocacy. Number two is by really, grouping with your friends, your family. We need from individuals to corporate to the business community, especially the employers. We are helping you to preparing these refugee immigrants and low-income individuals to become employed for you. And that is, you are saving about $2,800, So the employers, the business community, individuals, as the Columbus way to help us donate, to these nonprofit organizations, we have to come together, and even volunteering is so important because, transporting these newcomers from one place to another, and even shopping is quite an experience. So there are multiple ways that we can but donate, advocate, and volunteer, and also promote the work that we are doing.
I would underline that. I think that we all have links somewhere in the program, or at least Doug told me we would. And you can go there. YWCA, we serve in our family center meals 365 days a year, 3 meals a day, and those are powered by volunteers. So if you have the resource of time, so many nonprofits need that. If you have the resource of money, nonprofits need that too. And talk to your community about getting engaged alongside you. So I would echo what Dr. Seleshi said: advocate, volunteer, and give.
Can I just put in a quick little plug? This is more probably to the question that Lisa asked around what can we do to advocate. In November, led by my colleague, Councilmember Barosa de Padilla, Council created the Commission on Immigrants and Refugee. There are still, I think they are still taking applications until the 16th. That is a good place for folks to make sure the voices are heard in this moment when people are trying to silence those voices. So it will be a great place for advocacy, and I would encourage folks to apply and make yourself a part of that conversation.
Hello, my name is Mimi McGinty. I have the honor of being on the board of ETSS at Tewahedo, and I want to thank our esteemed panel, the heads of nonprofits, and all the supporters here today, and of course in Columbus. And I think my question may be a little redundant, but just to put a more immediate tone to it, because all the ideas and suggestions on what we can actively do to address this gap have been extremely helpful. But the reality, as brought up by in YWCA, 50% of your budget on housing gone. With ETSS, it's insurmountable, the amount of money, but we also have 24 families here today that funding doesn't exist. And they need housing, food, just basic needs. So I think in addition to all the suggestions and all the work we need to do, we need to look at the immediate gap. And I ask, what are some suggestions? Do we go, I don't know if there's rainy day funds or donations, like immediate actions we can take as we figure this out, the more near-term and long-term solutions?
Thank you for that. And yes, I mean, we are meeting immediate needs every single day, so we have them every day, right? And Dr. Seleshi and I are able to be up here talking about our organizations, and I want to be very clear that all of the organizations in this room have immediate needs. And so if I were someone who wasn't associated with an organization figuring out how to help, I would start with figuring out what I care about the most, right? Specialize a little bit into what you care about and dig deep into the work of those organizations serving the things that you care about. And better yet, like, bring someone along with you, even better if it's your kid, so that you're creating some virtuous generational impact here. But we, as I said, we serve meals every day. We rely on donations. I will do a quick plug for our social justice work. For my predecessor, Christy Angel, began at YWCA after George Floyd was murdered, the premier racial justice education program, I believe, in our nation. It is housed right here at our YWCA in Columbus. And because of Christy and her team at that time, answering the call and the thirst and the demand in our community, we stood up something special. We cannot let it fall in the face of what we are being told, as I said, is a national abandonment, right? A national walking away of these principles of peace, justice, dignity, and freedom for all. We at YWCA aren't going to let that happen, but we can't do that on our own. If we don't have people in our community willing to say that they still care about the cause of racial justice, about eliminating racism and empowering women, we will be screaming into a void. We will be educating no one. And so we do need the support of you and your organizations for our social justice work. It's not going anywhere, and we need our community behind us.
If I may, real briefly, follow nonprofits on Instagram in particular. They are regularly sharing what immediate emergency needs they have to serve their clients. Maybe work for us at the Human Service Chambers to make some sort of efficient way to amplify those kinds of things, but in case you're not on Instagram. But that's a very concrete, small way you can be impactful in real time.
And I would just say that what you just heard was the urgency of the moment. Council, the city will not gloss over those needs. We couldn't, because we have Councilmember Melissa Green on the council, who would not allow, she's a perfect advocate. But I will also say that I believe the role of city government now, local government, is to bring stability in the midst of the chaos. And so that's the role that we will play. We will try to bring folks together, convene big coalitions, and try to put forward thoughtful responses to these emerging needs. That's the role that I think the city will play over the next year or so.
We so wish we had more time for this topic. I hope you found today's community conversation not only sobering, but that it motivated you to think about different ways that you can help during these challenging and uncertain times. Fortunately, the CMC has gathered links of all of the different ways that you can help. So please go to the CMC website as soon as you get back to wherever you're headed after this lunch, and figure out some way that you and your family and your business organization can do something to make change. Very briefly, I want to once again thank the sponsors of today's forum: Installed Building Products, Mullard Consulting, Nationwide, and the United Way of Central Ohio. We are also grateful to the presenting sponsor of our live stream, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, and our live stream partner, the Columbus Dispatch, and the Ellis for hosting us. And our very special appreciation to today's speakers, Dr. Seleshi Asfaw, Elizabeth Brown, Michael Corey, Council President Shannon Hardin, and of course our host, Dr. Lisa Courtice. Please make plans to join us right here at the Ellis next Wednesday for another terrific forum, Insights from Congresswoman Joyce Beatty. Thank you, everyone. We could not do this without you. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.